Anytime you're ready, Babaji.
Om Sham no Mitraha Sham Varunaha Sham no Bhavat Varyama Sham no Indro Brihaspatihi Sham no Vishnu Rakramaha Namo Brahmane Namaste Vayu Tvameva Pratjaksham Brahmasmi Tvameva Pratjaksham Brahma Varishami Ritam Varishami Satyam Varishami Tan Mamavatu Tadvaktaram Avatu Avatu Mam Avatu Vaktaram Om Shantihi Shantihi Shantihi. Salutations to all beings, salutations to the humans, salutations to the ancestors, salutations to the celestials, salutations to the gods and goddesses, salutations to the rishis, yogis, sages and seers. Salutations to the Trinity, God with form, Brahma, Vishnu and Shiva. And salutations to the formless Brahman. Thou art what is real, what is true, and what is beneficial. Therefore protect us, protect our teachers. Protect Guru, Dharma and Sangha forevermore. Om peace, peace, peace. We welcome you all this fine morning, which is starting out sunny here in Hawaii. And we welcome not only our ashramites and those who have come in from outside on this early morning to spend the hours of 6 a.m. to 7 a.m. in meditation silently with each other, but also our live streaming audience. Those of you who have checked in on our new time for satsang. We're not doing it anymore in the evening because it's so late on the east and west coasts and people don't tune into it. But we are having instead an early morning satsang after our meditation here, which is a good way of getting the creative juices rolling, as they say. Creative juices in this sense means the mind, the mental organism. It should be fresh out of deep sleep if yoga is being done properly and balance is being maintained, and if one is able to sustain sattva, or equanimity of mind, throughout life, then the waking state should be reflected on the dreaming state and on the deep sleep state as well. And the deep sleep is really just an imitation, if you will, of samadhi, or of a state of mind that's unified at all times, not fragmented, not scattered, not unfocused, not dull, not off again, on again, but in one point all the time, the way I found my teacher and the way he taught us how to be in yoga. It's the beautiful word for it, just a 4-letter word, but a very good one, called yoga. So we meet here at the SRV ashram in Honoka'a, Hawaii, on the Big Island, set way out in the middle of the ocean, as far away from any land as any island chain in the whole world. Surrounded by the Ganga Pacifica, as we call her, and therefore feeling very purified by the presence of such a large mass of water, with so many beings living in it and around it and on its shores. And it's very indicative of different kinds of oceans. We know there's an Ananda Sagara. Ananda means bliss, so there's an ocean of bliss which Ramakrishna has told us about, and which all of us know very well back in our subtle memory. That is memory of previous lifetimes, memory of being disembodied, which is really very much like dreaming in deep sleep. And there's also an ocean of physical water. We just called her Ganga Pacifica. That's the way that the Ganga, or water, appears here on earth. as a holy sacrament for us to bathe in and take our ablutions. And it would that more people do that in such a way that they would go consciously to water and treat it as a sacred thing, which it is, very much so. You're immersing yourself in a liquid essence, and it's very much like consciousness, immersing yourself in your own consciousness. If you would go to that remote retreat, that seaside, that beach inside of your own mind, and dive into that ocean, then you would have that reflection. And then there's, of course, another ocean we want to be very careful of and very wary of, and that's called the samsara sagara. That is the ocean of samsara, or lives of birth and death and ignorance. In rounds, in constant rounds, never waking up to the fact that one is birthless, deathless, timeless, and beyond the elements, water, fire, air, earth, and ether. The elements all then come out of you, instead of you being bound into the elements. So, as the man that was hard of hearing would say about now, what do you say about the 5 elephants? As is written in the Advaita, that book that's on the shelf that SRV has put out that all of you should read. The Advaita and his 24 teachers in nature. So if we find ourselves here in the embodied condition, surrounded by an ocean of flesh or an ocean of living beings flowing around different countries, we really begin to look at it more as nadis. Rivers are nadis. If you were to get up off the earth and look down satellite-wise and see all the rivers coursing to the ocean, you'd think, this is really a living organism, wouldn't you? It may be insentient, but it takes on the reflection of sentiency from something else. They're sort of like the moon borrowing light from the sun, as the Vedantic adage says. And so everything borrows this life of the spirit, even though it may itself not be spirit. There's only one spirit, and that's, of course, transcendent of all forms, no matter where they are, in heaven, in earth, in your mind. Trinity, Ishvara even, Vivekananda said, the highest form God of God that man can comprehend still. No match, no comparison, cannot retain its solubility in the presence of Brahman. It would have to liquefy. So water there again has a very profound meaning to us, as the ability just to go into a liquid state and flow, its purity. So these are thoughts that inhabit the mind after meditation, and hopefully all of life becomes a meditation for the advanced aspirant, the seeker of truth. So satsang this morning about asking some questions. I don't see a paper here in front of me as usual, so we're not sure how many people have picked up on our new time to give satsang on the mainland, some of the students in India and in the mainland. But nevertheless, we have a small group with us here that has come to meditation, and later on we'll have a larger group here for class at 2:30, and we hope that you'll all join us then for the second installment of Advaita of the Avatars. And Advaita, that key word in Vedanta, and beginning to gain great notoriety in the world as non-dualism or non-duality. Swami Vivekananda's gift to us. Advaita Vedanta. And then the avatars, that which descends, this great single soul that breaks itself into a limit, and then comes down into the limitations of the body and associates with form in a very grand way, in their case, full of consciousness. Anandamayi, full of bliss. Karunamayi, full of compassion. There's so many manifestations of that, but when it comes as an avatar, then of course it's a major manifestation of consciousness, and it's always breaking into samadhi as well as breaking into a limit. It's breaking out of that limit and into samadhi. So that class will be this afternoon at 2:30 Hawaii Standard Time. In the meantime, with our small group here present, the 6 of us, plus whoever may write in who's watching the satsang with questions, we can begin to take some. And since we do have to communicate with the camera and with the audience, I'll be relating the questions through the microphone so that they will be clearly heard by everyone who's looking on. And then I will take up the task of trying to answer in a cogent way your questions. So let's begin then with that little preamble. Anything forthcoming?
Nothing's come in through the screen.
All right, so then we have other questions here in house. What are they? Let's start with Adam.
Okay. Well,
Our young man who has just come to the islands. He was just presently at Swami Shantarupananda's center in Portland, and associating there, and is also come over from Hungary after his last high school year, and he's been one of those rare beings who has decided to take a year off of school, which I recommend in most cases, if at all possible, for the youth, so that they can study their spiritual life and get a reorientation before they launch into college, which, along with its benefits, also has its drawbacks, as we know nowadays as we know about everything in life, as its positive and negative side, and its mixture too of the both. So we welcome him to our ashram, and he's, what are you, 19 now, 20?
19.
19 years old, and very focused in on the Vedanta and on Sri Ramakrishna's gospel, and on memorizing the slokas. So we're very pleased to have him with us. So let's have a question from you.
Okay.
Okay, please.
Well, I wrote it down, so you don't mind, I'll read it up.
Okay, read it up and then I'll make sure they hear it.
Okay. When reading about different religions, should one perceive those religions as different pathways which lead to the ultimate truth? Or should one continuously make the attempt to seek out that underlying truth regardless of which religion they're reading about?
So should one, the gist of the question is, should one, when reading about the different religions of the world, look at those as many paths leading to one goal? Or, as you were saying,
Should they continuously seek out the underlying truth without discriminating pathways?
or should they, well, yes, or should they continue to seek out the underlying truth of all of them without necessarily discriminating between the religions? No, we do need to separate things. When we give the teaching of non-separation, which we have given, in fact, we're working on the series of 4 classes called The Devotion of Non-Separation, which was our last series, and it's turning out very well, and that will soon be posted online. But when we talk about the non-separation or separation, there are some very healthy separations that we need to engage in. That's called discrimination. And that was the first word, of course, that came to mind when your question was read out, that it's very healthy and very positive, very beneficial to discriminate between the different religious traditions of the world, not in the old sense of the term, discrimination being an evil, but to discriminate Viveka style in the name of Swami Vivekananda's name, his namesake. And so that, not that we keep distinctions between the religions, we want to ultimately end up unifying them. Like Sri Ramakrishna, of course, he's a very special case. But he used to say, words like Christianity and Hinduism and Buddhism and so forth are barriers to spiritual enlightenment. So he was pretty stark about it. Of course, he could have said that in a certain perspective, under a certain context. It could have been in coming out of samadhi and therefore seeing the boundaryless expanse of consciousness and then speaking from that standpoint spontaneously, as Mother Kali used to do through him. And later on, he might have seen a situation where 2 people were discussing different religions, and he'd have to make sure that they knew the parameters of the religions so that they could each follow their own religion before they jumped to this universal platform, which demands a very attentive and rarefied spiritual atmosphere that one attains. So that kind of distinction is to be kept as long as it's needed. In fact, Maya itself is to be kept as long as it's needed. If you think this horrible word, speak about bad four-letter words, Maya, you see, but Sri Ramakrishna used to give the tantric teaching that Maya was like the skin of a mango that kept the mango ripe. It kept the mango safe until it ripened. And then once it was ripe, you would peel it. And nobody eats the peelings, then you'd throw it away. So and we know about mangoes here in Hawaii because we have so many different varieties of them, so it's a good teaching for Hawaii that when we ripen as spiritual aspirants, then we do definitely want to discard Maya as far as we can. The worlds of name and form in time and space based on karma, or cause and effect. That's a good definition for Maya, fivefold. Nama, Rupa, Desha, Kala, Nimitta. Nobody else except Vivekananda has really given us a full definition of Maya, therefore we have some sort of trepidation around it or some sort of fear of it. But basically just get thee behind me. And when Christ said get me behind me, it doesn't mean that evil was being destroyed. It was just not in the picture anymore, and good was taking its place. And then after good there's better, and after better there's best. And Vivekananda used to say that, from good to better to best. But back to your original question again, to be more specific about it, ekam sat vipra bahuda vedanti was one of the oldest statements in the Rig Veda, in one of the oldest, if not the oldest, carbon-dated scripture on record, Rig Veda, one of the four Vedas. And then that means ekam sat, one truth, but called by different names, or reached by different pathways, sometimes they say. So yes, when you're following a certain religious path, you should be on it and perfectly in knowledge of its parameters, what its offerings are, even what its limitations might be, as religions do all have limitations. In fact, Sri Ramakrishna made a very startling statement once. He said, man blames religion for all problems, but it was actually God who put the problems in religion. And why is that, you would ask? Well, because if your path is smooth and easy, then you don't build any muscles. And muscles here means you don't build any character. And character is the essence of spiritual life, not blisses and visions and that kind of thing. Character, as far as we're concerned here on earth, is the essence thing, the essential thing. We will have to build character in order for us to qualify ourselves for higher learning and for higher intelligence and for higher samadhis. So there are impediments in those religious paths on purpose, and one of those impediments is narrowness, and another is hypocrisy, and those kinds of problems are there. Those could be classed more in the human mind. But the religious paths lend themselves to that kind of barrier, impediment, and a person has to cut his teeth on them, just like a baby cuts its teeth. You have to cut your teeth on the religions. And then Swami Vivekananda would put it, it's good to be born in a church, but don't die in a church. He made that statement once. So, yes, you come into the religious folds better than not, in most cases. Learn the morals, learn the ethics, learn the commandments, and then go on to Dharma, because Dharma is the next step beyond morality and ethics. Otherwise you get into this round of earth, heaven, hell with the ancestors, and great beings like Buddha and others wanted you off that wheel. That is leading you back potentially to the samsara sagara, the ocean of confusion, the ocean of chaos, the ocean of suffering. So you want to have a clearer view, a higher view, a deeper perspective, and that's where the gist of your question, the answer to it comes in. Is that you do want to have that unifying mind, that universal mind that sees all religions as paths to the same goal. They all might take different routes, just like the different yogas we've been talking about take different routes. Bhakti, the slow boat to China, or to India in this case. The slow boat, you see, with a scenic view along the way. But Jnanam, the sword stroke path. You cut your way quickly through the Maya. So whatever the pathway demands, that the aspirant takes up and qualifies himself, cuts his teeth on that. And it's true inside of the many yogas, inside of any given religion, and it's true also of the religious paths themselves. One has to wend their way, hopefully better than wend their way, make a straight access to Brahman, to the Almighty Father, to Allah, to Buddha nature, however you want to call it. And do that and put Maya behind thee as quick as you can and get to the essence of life and begin to live a divine life. Why spend all our time in sadhana? Why spend all our time in struggle? Why spend all our time dealing with our karmas and all our time suffering? See, that's usually what people think of when they think, oh, geez, I have such a hard road to hoe ahead of me. And if they can get the money considerations and the relationships and all of that stuff out of the way, then they think, oh, it's time for me to start on the spiritual path. What a problem I'm going to have here. Why this? You see, you're talking about bliss, you're talking about peace, you're talking about higher wisdom, you're talking about finding the essence of your very being and becoming one with it. Why have any trepidation about that? See, so my point is, move straight ahead. Our founder, Lex Hixon, at the end of his life, I was with him at times and heard him discourse on it, was giving a series of classes called The Open Space Beyond Religion. And some of that has been even taken down and written, typed out. So it was a beautiful series of classes that communicated this ability to use the religions and then move beyond them. Vivekananda used to say, we want to go beyond Bible, we want to go beyond the Vedas, we want to go beyond the Quran, but not by doing away with Bible, Quran and Vedas, but by using them to their fullest extent, and then going beyond them. He used to say, and you probably know it by heart, you see in books and temples, vain thy search. Thine only is the hand that holds the rope that drags thee on. So cease lament, let go thy hold. So you yourself have this rope around your own neck and you're dragging yourself here and there and you're blaming it on Quran and Veda and Bible, or you're trying to look for the answer why you're being dragged around by God or devil in the Vedas or in the Quran or in the Bible. But it's actually yourself that's doing the dragging. And you also fashioned the rope and put it around your neck. If you could stop and look, you could see that that was the case. So that's a very good question, and it opens up a whole parameter of teachings that one could discourse on. Really, Ramakrishna could go on for days just talking about that. And of course, he was the consummate universalist. One of the 3, maybe 4 main aspects of his coming to Earth in the 1800s, mid-1800s. One of them is to bring Divine Mother into prominence in this day and age. Kali Avatar, he's called. And another one is the universality of all religions, how he not only talked about that, but actually practiced it. Not only practiced it, but actually epitomized it. Other people had spoken about it. It's not a new idea. Oh, let's get all the religions together, but you can't just throw them together in some amalgam. I mean, we've already been through the period in the 80s and the 90s now. We called these religious seminars that people have been giving. Oh, let's put a rabbi and a swami and a roshi and a rinpoche and a priest all together in one room and let's have them talk out about religion. Isn't it going to be fun? No, probably not going to be fun. They're not going to agree. They're going to start arguments. Or else polite. They'll be polite to each other. Oh, that's our sister religion, we have to be polite to each other. But Ramakrishna went far beyond that. He was actually into practicing each one to find out what he could learn about God in that religion. That was all. What can be found out about God in that religion? He was straight to the point, and it's a beautiful thing. No ego trips in the way, no my religion is better than yours, no my watch keeps the only right time. All of that was put behind me again. You see, get thee behind me. Let's get to the point here. So he was walking the paths as he professed them. That's why Om Shtapakaya Chadharmasya Sarvadharma Swarupine Avatara Varishtaya Ramakrishnaya Yate Namaha, in the great hymn Om Hring Ritang that Vivekananda wrote. Or as we were putting it last night, Sarvadharma Stapakastvam Sarvadharma Swarupakaha Acharyanam Mahacharyo Ramakrishnaya. So, Sarvadharma Astapakastvam, Sarvadharma Astapakastvam. He was the steady in all the dharmas. Sarva Dharma, all dharmas. Sarvadharma Swarupakaha, he was the epitomizer of all dharmas. Acharyanam Mahacharya, he's the acharya of acharyas. He teaches the teachers. To him are eternal salutations. To him who came as Ram, to him who came as Krishna, to him who came as Jesus, to him who came as Buddha, to him who came as Muhammad and Moses. There's only one avatar, and he comes many times. People have been saying, there's many avatars come many times, or there's just one avatar, and we're going to have to wait 2,000 years for him. And he still hasn't come, you see. But no, there's one avatar, and he comes many times. It couldn't be any other way if you knew your Advaita, if you knew your non-duality. Just take a huge, beautiful silken cloth made out of consciousness and take some sort of cosmic scissors and start cutting away at that and shape one into Christ with a beard and shape another with the Buddha with a shaven head and another into Ramakrishna. It's cut out of the same cloth, isn't it? That only makes real sense to you when you start opening up to the beauty in all religions. So after watching Lex Hickson give talks about the open space beyond all religion, I began to formulate little Swami Vivekananda-like phrases. See, all religion is indigenous to your soul was one of those. There's no such thing as a foreign religion. That's another one. So we should cast that out of our vocabulary and out of our thinking, and therefore when we see a Muslim or we see a Mohammedan, a Jew, or if we see a Christian or we see a Buddhist, we say, we're looking at our very self. We're practicing the presence of God in all beings. And in the presence of the one truth in all religions. Ekam sat vipra bahuda vedanti. Yes, another question.
So Babaji, is it best to practice one path, or can we take from different paths and make our own?
Very beautiful question comes, is it good to practice just one path, or can we take from different paths and make our own? Yes and yes, both. I'd say the only no, which was not put in your question, is that you shouldn't mix the paths indiscriminately. Back to kind of associated with your question, you have to keep them sacrosanct. I sometimes tell about the dream that I had where, being a musician, I played so many different kinds of music. Grew up playing bluegrass with my brothers, was given a cello and taught classical music with a classical teacher, picked up the guitar, played Indian music, did jazz in my 20s. So many different kinds of music I was exposed to, and I had a dream one night where I was in this hall and all the musics were being played, and it was horrible, mixing together. And so there were doors, so I just started closing the doors, and I just left one door open, and that music came pure. I closed that door. If I wanted another music, then I opened that door and heard that music, you see, and it was pure. So in that way, I was shown, as it were, by Divine Mother, whom I was meditating on and whom I have meditated on for over 40 years, that how to keep everything sacrosanct, keep everything in its own place. You do that in your house, otherwise your kitchen's a mess and you can't find anything and you can't cook. So you keep everything in its own place. Very important teaching. Ramakrishna was in samadhi most of the time, but sometimes he would take his students to task. He wouldn't find something in the right place, he would complain to them about it. Say, you didn't put this back when you used it, and put it in the right place. So even in everyday life, those things were being shown to illustrate the teachings. So your question is a very good one. I would say that's the only cautionary measure. Is you find Ramakrishna, when he practiced Muslim religion, putting all articles of Hinduism away. Even his precious Mother Kali. Pictures were taken down in his room, the few he had. And he just was with Govinda Rai, his teacher, and he was just learning the Muslim religion. He didn't mix them. So people have a sort of misconception about that. Oh, let's practice all the religions, and everything is the same. These phrases are not healthy phrases. These are not universal phrases. Universalism has its rules and its laws, and they should be espied and taken seriously and then practiced by you when you enter into such a confluence like that. Like Sri Ramakrishna's story, when the sailor is going down the river and he hits the bay, but at the bay is the confluence of about 3 or 4 mighty rivers. You know where I'm going with this. Religions. And you're hitting the bay of confusion in religion just before you get to the ocean beyond all religion, the open space beyond all religion. So you hit this bay, and because of the confluence of 5 or 6 different rivers, the tides are completely unconventional. Everything is out of whack, and you get caught there in your sailboat, and you can't break free. It's a very good example or metaphor for what Ramakrishna saw even the Hindus of the day doing when they were all of a sudden exposed to Muslim religions of their neighbors, to the Christianity of the English who were coming into India at the time. So, and one had to select a religion. So yes, it's very good to select one religion and practice it with all your heart. But it doesn't mean you can't borrow from other religions, because Ramakrishna said that, in the meantime, before you strike water in the well you're digging, you should pretty much keep your mind on the task at hand. Practice that religion. Find out what it is. Find out what yoga is. Find out what Vedanta is. Don't go running off to this and that path. Better for you. The Zen Buddhists say, that's wild fox Zen when people do that. They don't stick to one teacher, one Roshi, and one path, one form of Zen. And it's called wild fox Zen. It's not recommended. You start learning from different Roshis, and they all have different styles. They may be teaching the essential truth, but they have different styles of doing it. The result of that is confusion in the student's mind. Conflict, as if it isn't hard enough to already find enlightenment and get to the goal. You're adding more problem by all these conflicts of different teachers and what they said, and they may contradict each other, not about the ultimate truth, most likely, but about the way to get there. They've all found it on their own. I mean, I've seen swamis of the same religion, of the same lineage, argue about the way to get to truth. Because they each they found it. They each have found it. You can take one of them as your teacher, no doubt. But if you mix several of them, you're going to have a very, very special kind of mind, or a very special kind of capacity to do that. And usually that capacity does not come to you until you're well practiced, till you're well established along one trajectory. You've dug one deep well and you've got water. Then you know what water is. Then you can say definitively, this water is the same water as my neighbor's water, his well, you see. Oh, I see there's no difference in the water. But before that, you struck water in your well, and had that water to taste and to feel and to see. You couldn't make that statement with any divinity, could you? So, yes, could borrow from different religions along the way. Share. There are 9 limbs of bhakti in Ramchandra's path, Sri Ramchandra, the great avatar. And the second one, I think, is sharing the wisdom with others. And of course, that's not argumentation. There's another cautionary measure about that. If you get together and start arguing to prove my religion's better than yours, then it's just like, no, it's, right now it's 7:54. No, that clock says it's 7:52, you see. So I've got a conflict right away. So best to stick to one religious path, one teacher, strike the water, strike the gold. After that, you can broaden out and start making bridges. Until that, the bridge is very unsound. You don't want people to go across it. Could cave in. Now, any other questions?
Yes, I have one. So this is actually about brahmacharya.
Brahmacharya is the celibacy one practices, or the moderation one practices, usually in the early stages, or lifestyle like my teacher, 90 some years of a whole monastic life of celibacy. All right, now go ahead.
Okay, so how is brahmacharya related to the practice of renunciation, first for the renunciate and for the householder? And how can spiritual practice really support a householder in practicing that in the deepest way possible? And how can they deepen and stabilize that practice?
So when he wants to know or hear about some teachings around brahmacharya, which is, of course, we know one of the 5 yamas and niyamas, or one of the 10 yamas and niyamas of yoga, the preliminaries before you even sit like this, before you breathe in concentrated fashion. Asana and pranayama is just that you learn these 5 yamas and 5 niyamas, brahmacharya being one of those. So it's a celibate student you're looking for, someone who can retain their energy instead of fritter it away. It applies to sexuality, yes, but I've always taught it a little broader than that brahmacharya means fidelity to anything, not just to non-sexuality or non-sensuality, but fidelity to your teacher, fidelity to your path and everything. That's the kind of brahmacharya you're practicing. In other words, lust can be not just lust for a feminine form or a masculine form, but it can be lust for gold, can't it? Or lust for power. So in that way you have to sort of broaden the definitions so that they don't become so specific that they lose their universal appeal again. Now, as far as celibacy for the monk, he asked, what is that like? Celibacy for the householder, which is particularly probably more the essence of the question, and how does it benefit, I think you were saying, a householder as they're living their life? How does it benefit them to practice brahmacharya? Well, my own experience with that, because I am not a monk, I learned and trained by monks, especially two, and of course given mantra diksha by one. And I have a lot of concourse, a lot of relationships with monks, being the guru of the SRV association, so that I have communications with many of them, and not just of the Ramakrishna orders. I've also had communications with other monks and swamis of the Buddhist fold and other Hindu traditions, so I know that that's a very serious thing for them. The way Ramakrishna put it is that the monk renounces externally and internally, and the householder must renounce internally. That's the best way I've ever heard it put. That is, the householder is not expected to renounce outwardly. Ramakrishna himself even said so. He said, a monk, must give up the world, but a mother bird has to feed her chicks. He put it something like that. So he knew the practicality of people living in the world. Hopefully they were living in the world. His contention is, do not live in the world and become worldly. You always know the world to be unreal. That's rule of thumb in Vedanta. The thumbs up in Vedanta is that you know that the world is unreal. No doubt about it. The monks have told you, Christ has told you to give it up. Buddha has told you to give it up and demonstrated how, all the way up to Ramakrishna has told you to give it up. Do not consider it to be real. It's illusory, it's ephemeral, it's transitory, it's a reflection of Brahman, it's Brahman with attributes. You can run the gamut from very, very unforgiving to somewhat kind to the teaching, like saying all of this is Brahman with attributes. That's how the ancient rishis put it. Most digestible form for most of us. But you cannot consider it real. God cannot be a form. God only associates with forms. That much we can say about the world of name and form, Maya. Otherwise why give it a name? And be careful of it. Like George Harrison's song, beware of Maya. You see? So why beware of it? You see? Why give it a name? That's worldliness to Ramakrishna. In fact, Ramakrishna said, evil is not the disease of the world anymore, as it used to be. Worldliness is the chronic disease of the world. To become worldly is to forget your true nature and just become a materialist. I think the saying is rank materialist. So you're just attached to gross things, and that plays into samsara. So how that applies to the teaching on brahmacharya is that the monk will renounce externally and internally. The world is not real, so it will have as least amount of concourse with society, with objects of the senses, and of course with women or with men if you're a pravajika or a nun in our tradition. You'll follow those strict rules. And Ramakrishna used to say, the monk can't even look at the statue of a woman, a picture of a woman. That's how strict the rules are in most monastic orders. There are some orders of monks that can even frequent the society of women and so forth. So in different countries, but I'm talking specifically in India, darshanas and so forth, there are very strict rules around it. So they keep their celibacy. And the householder then has to move amongst the objects of the senses. Be in the world but not of it is the common term for that. And is more a yogi. I'd say someone was asking me that question recently, and I said that Sri Krishna on the battlefield of Kurukshetra tells Arjuna, be a yogi, Arjuna, because Arjuna is not going to be a monk, and he's a warrior. And he comes from a family of 5 brothers, and none of them are monks. And so he's pretty much of the Kshatriya class, warrior caste, and they're going to have families, and they're going to protect the society dharmically. The Pandava clan are dharmic people, completely dharmic. They're not worldly, and they're not adharmic, like the other clan, the Yadava clan that's warring against them. Is very adharmic. They want power, they want lands, they want domination, all the occult powers. So in that setting, you find this teaching very beautiful that is being given. That Krishna says the best way to be is to be a yogi. You're not going to be a monk, and you're not going to be a householder only. Be a yogi, Arjuna. So to follow the path of yoga is a great thing. The yogic lifestyle is superior in my way of thinking. It's what I chose, is to practice yoga. Yoga is, I said it right there, it is a practice. Vedanta isn't really a practice, it's a truth. You look at it, you read it, you hear it from the teacher, you read it in the scriptures, and you say, oh, I see, it's the whole thing. It's the statement of realization had by monks and householders from time out of mind. Just read the Itihasa or the Smriti of India, and you'll find it on record. Smriti means memory. You'll find it on the record of how many people followed the path, non-monastic, and had their realizations that led them up to enlightenment. In fact, SRV here, you could say, Sharda Ramakrishna Vivekananda Associations of the West, that Lex Hickson was brainstorming and who brought a few of us in on it as board members in the early days in 1980s when it was first formulated, is pretty much based on the fact that we want to educate the Western householder about Dharma, about living in the world and teaching Dharma to their children. Because if that begins, you see, India has a rich heritage of Dharmic householders, Dharmic ashrams, run by householders, not by monks. I think the Ramakrishna Order fairly recently, had a list of all of the different ones that they were associated with, and there were hundreds on the list, that they wanted to know about the Dharmic householders that were non-monastic and how they were running their affairs and how they were teaching and so forth. So a list was compiled in India, so there's a rich heritage of it. But in the West, we don't have it. Well, I mean, we don't have monasteries, for one thing. Most of the monasteries that are Christian have been abandoned. Very hard to keep them going in a society that doesn't care about anything except money and relations with matter. But then the householder never really had an ashram. I mean, I'm speaking from experience here because I've tried to keep 3, 4, actually a dozen, because I've had to change their locations so many times, ashrams going in a Western household, Western neighborhoods, in cities in America, and it's a no-go. They're not going to support you. They're going to look at you like you're an oddity. So you have to stick it out and let them know, this is really here for your good. We're not here for money or to convince you of another religion or something. We're here just to show you the philosophy of Vedanta, which is the truth that all the great beings followed, and also to help you practice yoga, help you practice, so that worldliness will not encroach upon you. Because otherwise worldliness just seeps in. It seeps in to the cracks in your sleeping consciousness. And pretty soon you don't know anything but matter. And even your mind is left fallow. Manre krishi kajjanana is one song in India. O mind, you do not know how to farm your own field. The soil of your consciousness lies fallow, untended. Beautiful song by Ram Prasad Sen, Bengali poet saint, whom Ramakrishna was thrilled by his songs. Tantric songs, tantric hymns of enlightenment, Lex called them. So you don't know how to farm your old field. It sounds like yoga to me because Patanjali is always talking about the mind field. I call it the mind field. Be careful where you step. There are mines out there. He called it the mind field, and it's a field of vibration. I mean, this too is a field of vibration. Everything is vibrating here. Our quantum physics has taught us that, if nothing else. But inside is the source for that vibration. Those vibrations are the effect. The tree is the tree in my mind first, before it becomes the tree in nature. Nature came out of me, not the other way around. The materialist thinks the other way around, that food gave sperm, sperm was given into the womb of the mother, into the ovum, that produced the fetus produced the body grew, the brain developed. It got intelligence later, we hope, for God's sake, it did, and then it died. That's the material cause. Beginning, middle, and end of it, right there. Poof. But Krishna said there are no beginnings, middles, and ends to anything. Then how am I to look at this? As a material cause only. Where am I going to find the cause for that cause, if that is an effect? In my own mind, where else? I construct worlds in dream tonight and destroy them when I wake up. Is it any different here? It just takes a little longer. Time slows down. Vibration solidifies. The rate of vibration becomes denser, grosser. That's what an object is thought vibrating at a slower rate. A denser rate, that is. So to have the practice of celibacy then helps to liquefy. You say dense, the opposite of density might be liquefaction, so it helps to liquefy things. You can see the object come apart. And when it comes apart, it's a different kind of vibration in the field, isn't it, than an object. It's now a vibration in your mind. And there you see where the fan came from and where the altar came from. I mean, it's the same in puja. The altar that's the mudra for it. There is here. What is there is also here. See? So the mudra is mriga mudra, the deer, the gentle mudra. You know what? That came out of this, naturally so. If I want to understand that fully, then I must take that and put it back into this. It's called dissolving the mind stream. And that's a practice of yoga. The Vedantist isn't going to tell you to dissolve the mind stream because the Vedantist already knows that truth. There's no need to prove it to the Vedantist or to the luminary. To most monks you don't need to prove it. That's their advantage over the householders, is that they think about God all the time, or should. And because they do, they get enlightenment quicker. And if they don't, shame on them. If you spend a life as a monk and don't really make very substantial spiritual progress, they look at you and say, what's this guy doing hanging out as a monk, you see? You'd probably be better getting a wife and having children and learning the lessons that way. So if you concentrate on God, you should get some definitive result. And then it's going to be the same for the householder. What if the householder all of a sudden puts aside things that are distracting? You know, the householder existence basically, yes, I will have my job, I will make money, I will support my dharmic family, raise my children dharmically and so forth. But with that time left over, what am I going to do? Watch TV? Go on vacation? Or should I cut out some time for my spiritual life? That would be the householder's best step that could possibly be made. Quit wasting time and get to the purpose of realizing God, because if you can realize God in the family, then the family can realize God. And if the family can realize God, then all your generations, 7 generations on either side of you, will get released from bondage. You're going to affect the whole shooting match, forward and backwards. That's the teaching. So a little bit generally about the practice of faithfulness and fidelity to the goal, but as far as sexuality per se, practicing retainment of energies, that is, the best teaching of that is about sublimation. If you keep it in and don't sublimate it, then it's a problem. And that's where you see it backfire on people. Where chakras, like cylinders, aren't firing right, you see. I have a 7-cylinder car, you see. Or a 6-cylinder if you don't call this a chakra anymore, because sometimes they don't even call that a chakra. It's just beyond a center or a vortex. So I have a 6-cylinder car here, like most 6-cylinder cars out there, and you know, if these lower ones aren't firing right, then it's problems. So if I just say, I give up sex, or I give up food, I fast, or I'm going to practice silence, mauna, that's not going to do me any good if I don't sublimate the energy that I get from that retainment. I have to bring it up the spine if you want to talk about it Kundalini yoga style, that yoga, the mystical yoga, which is actually a very practical yoga that has a lot to do with food as well. It was never taught that way by the so-called teachers in the 60s, but that's based on food, sanctity of food, energy in food, prana, vital energy. So sublimation would be the way for monk and householder both. They would practice the retaining of energy and then bringing it up with practice. Little breathing exercise, don't overdo it. Little asana, don't have too many postures. 1 is enough, 2, one finally. Ekasana is the asana you want. Eka means one. And also then, beyond body and breathing, and get to this idea of everything comes from my mind, pratyahara. That if I can withdraw my mind from objects, I can succeed in yoga. If I can't, I cannot succeed in yoga. It's the fourth limb, and it's the failing point. It's definitely for all Westerners who are trying it, and often very difficult for practiced yogis, aspiring yogis and yoginis. It's a stumbling block. You can't have concentration without it, pratyahara. So get to that idea beyond body and breathing. When you get that set, then get to the idea that all of this comes from my mind, and I must be able to withdraw it back in to my mind and dissolve it there, like I do in deep sleep. See how I do it in deep sleep. Oh, I see how it goes. Now I have to do that in meditation. Now I see it even better, you see. Yes?
Well, I was just thinking that some people are unclear about the meaning of sublimation. And so when you say you take that energy that you're not putting out, whether it's for sexuality or eating or other sensual, sense-oriented pursuits, what is that sublimation? You mentioned asana, don't do too many, but what does it look like? How do I bring it up? How do I turn it around?
Yes, sublimation, art is very subtle, like most things spiritual, and there have been some questionable teachers who put it on the physical level, like, I have to clench at the base of the spine and suck up, as if subtle energy is going to react to that way. Probably just going to get sore haunches. But, there are hatha yoga practices that people do, but often the hatha yogis are the ones that are running the great risks and having the problems with the lower chakras. The sublimation process is much more subtle and refined than that. It's basically has to be attended by meditation because heart responds to meditation. It doesn't respond to physical things. So your objective is to raise that energy to the heart chakra, right? So how are you going to do that? There's some beautiful songs about it, actually. Ram Prasad, whom we just quoted, said that mother does not accept cheap bribes. That's how he puts it. You cannot sacrifice buffaloes and impress her, that kind of thing. So or do fantastic pujas and things like that. Not necessarily will impress her. What she responds to is love, devotion. So you have devotion and love in the heart. That is the sublimation power that brings this energy up the spine. But how do you put it in the heart? You can't just envision it and conceptualize it, because that stays in the mind, doesn't it? So now you're going to have to introduce that secret that Ramakrishna had of loving Mother so much, of loving God 120%, he said, that she had to respond to him. He once in the Kali temple, because she wouldn't reveal herself to him, he ran at her sword and was going to impale himself with it. And that's when he had his first vision of Mother Kali, when he was going to give his life away. And so that kind of all-out love is part of the sublimating power. You can't just treat it scientifically and expect this Kundalini power to rise. She's independent. She's fiercely independent. She is a living power. She's not an energy like prana that you can suck up the spine with some breathing. She's not food. She's not even just chit. Chit Shakti is how Father of Yoga himself called her. She's not just the power of thought. She's something else. She's something else. You talk about your woman. I wish you could see mine. See, Mother Kali. She's the supreme goddess, a goddess of wisdom, a goddess of sublimation, if you want to call her that in this case. So Kali and Durga are goddesses that preside over cremation grounds. That's why you see sometimes in the artistic representations, that Kali and Durga are running through the cremation grounds and breathing a mantra into souls so that they rise again. They're spiritually, they get their freedom from samsara. So that means their main function is over the spiritual evolution of beings. That's where they preside. Kali, Durga. Saraswati, Lakshmi, they have their own fields, but that aspect, they're all one mother, of course. But that aspect of Divine Mother, that's Kali Durga, that's really one, because Kali came out of Durga's third eye, was born out of Durga, so there's one goddess you're talking about there. Those have their specific purpose around the spiritual evolution of the aspiring soul. Yes?
That was a signal.
A signal that our satsang is coming to an end. So we will, it's a good place to end, speaking about the Divine Mother of the Universe. And we will meet again then in 6 hours or 7 hours or so for our class at 2:30. We'll go on in this vein only with the accent on the discourse for 3 hours with a break in between on the Advaita of the avatars. And then hopefully meet again here next Sunday for this same Saturday night puja, Sunday morning meditation and satsang. Thank you for your questions, and we bid aloha and farewell for now to our live streaming audience.